Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're moving on from Shadows of Change onto the Thrones of Decay, a DLC that we'll see at the end of this year, more than likely November or December, but is probably the one that I'm more excited about because it's Nurgle, Empire and Dwarfs, alongside the Nemesis Crown and some legendary heroes too, but there is a lot to talk about. Because as you can tell from the title, today we'll be talking about Nurgle, and the fact that the name of the DLC, Thrones of Decay, kinda hints towards something pretty damn cool. So, let's just jump right in, shall we? So, Nurgle as a faction right now is a bit problematic. You see, as a roster, it's great. The roster is massive, thanks to Champions of Chaos, of course. They've got a little bit of everything. The only bad thing is, of course, a lot of these units do the same things, and that's because this is how it works for a mono-god faction. They don't really need that many new units, however there's some pretty damn cool ones from Forge World that should definitely be part of a DLC. The biggest issue with Nurgle is more, it's got no economy, and obviously its tech tree is pretty bad. Most of the tech tree focuses around being in the Northern Chaos Waste, and that's why Kulgath suffers so much, because he is in a tropical climate. So, another character would be further up north, which is expected, and there's a lot to talk about because there's one specific character that I can only think about. So if we jump right into the Legendary Lord, the possible one, this is the only character in Nurgle's possible character list that I really want. This is Tamokon. Well, not really. You see, Tamokon you don't actually physically see, as he's just a maggot. He is very, very small, but he does possess bodies and he does ride a gigantic toad dragon, as you can see here. Let me give you a little bit of backstory. There was a campaign known as the Thrones of Chaos. This was supposed to be a 4-book series centered around 4 god-touched warriors. Tamokon being the only book that actually released. There were 4 sons born to a great warrior known as the Great Kurgan, but the Chaos Gods saw him as a fount of power in a sense, and when those children were born they were taken away by the very Chaos Gods themselves, raised by demonic powers essentially. Each of the children became powerful warriors in their own right and led mighty armies. However, we only know of the story of Tamokon, a warrior that was brought up with the Nurgle powers. Twisted and turned by corruption, Tamokon turned into a maggot, and he possesses bodies, enhancing them with his own malice and obviously the blessings of Papa Nurgle. We've seen him taking over Chaos Warriors, we've seen him taking over an ogre. The model that you see is actually him taking over the body of an ogre tyrant, and yeah, he's absolutely insane. I must say, out of all the campaigns that Games Workshop have released, Tamokon is one of my absolute favorites. I play it with my friends every now and then because it is such a fun campaign. The character is absolutely powerful. He takes over a large portion of Chaos Warrior tribes. It's not just Nurgle factions, he literally leads an army which would rival that of the Neverchosen too. Unfortunately, the character did perish in the book, but the idea was it was going to go into the next book after. A lot of rumors said that there was going to be the Khorne book afterwards as a model, and eventually did get released for Age of Sigmar, had more backstory in the Warhammer fantasy world than he did in Age of Sigmar, but hey, these things do happen. But Tamokon himself is absolutely awesome. The fact is, there's many possible mechanics that we can see here. For example, as you level up, you would get new bodies instead of a mount option, and at the end, when you have the Tyrant body, then you would get Bublos, which is the giant toad dragon. This character would be focused very heavily on melee combat with no magic, which I know might sound weird, but the fact is that this character would likely have a lot of debuffs and play around with a different amount of things to kind of supplement the loss of not having magic. And I imagine that Bublos would make him very, very fast because, I mean, it's a giant toad dragon, they do move around fairly quickly. I know some people would be thinking, well, he's a Warriors of Chaos character, and really it was more of a mono-god style character, even in the Tamokon book, though you could take him as a Lord option for the Warriors of Chaos. And we know a long time ago that CA said there's nothing stopping them from adding in a mortal character into the mono-god rosters, and I imagine that this is something that they'll want to do, because let's be honest, when you look at Nurgle, like, you've got Epidemius, you've got a lot of Great Unclean Ones. They're all either kind of boring or very samey or no backstory whatsoever. Seeing as we already have Plague Toads, which were part of Tamokon's book, I figured it's only a matter of time until we'll see him, and a Throne of Chaos DLC, which is, you know, known as the Thrones of Decay, I mean, it kind of fits, doesn't it? Now, we know that this DLC is going to have the usual, right? It's going to have a FLC Legendary Hero and a paid-for Legendary Hero. I very much doubt that it's going to be Nurgle getting the hero. I don't know why. I know that the Empire just recently had one with Ulrika, and obviously the Dwarfs are likely going to get one. But hey, for speculation's sake, if we do get a Legendary Hero for Nurgle, it's likely going to be one of two. One character is Epidemius, because, well, he's a character that we're kind of expecting. He's a Herald of Nurgle, he rides on a palanquin. This is why I'm saying that this character is not too special, because you've already got that. The only difference is that he is Nurgle's tallyman, so essentially he's just the glorified accountant. A lot of people are big fans of him, but unless he comes in with very unique abilities, I very much doubt that this character will bring anything new to the table, considering that the Plague Ridden does everything that he could do anyway. I mean, he could count. I just don't see that as a very interesting thing, in all honesty. However, there is a second option, which was also in the Tamokon book. This is Kasich the Befouled, a champion of Nurgle. He's also another Kurgan, and what makes him interesting is that he's a cavalryman. He actually has his own warband of Kurgan horsemen and so on. We right now don't have a lot of focus on Nurgle cavalry, and I feel like this could be an interesting character to introduce to actually give you a cavalry build, something that you would generally not use. His army was known as the Rot Knights. This is definitely something that we could see being implemented as a unit. We'll talk about them a little bit later, as they never really had a model. But yeah, I see this character as being able to boost up your cavalry, having a cavalry-focused army for something completely different, and it would be kind of cool. There could be other bonuses involved, but imagine actually having a full army of Chaos Knights of Nurgle, Plague Toads, all the usual stuff, just to be really, really buffed up. Variety is the spice of life. It's kind of how Gorda's Backstabber makes hobgoblins really viable in a single army. I kind of like the idea. Alright, so we're going to talk about units, but we're going to start off with a freaking cool one, because it is a Toad Dragon after all. We're expecting it with Tamokon as a mount option, because it was part of the model, so I could imagine that they could also make this into a big monster single entity for the Nurgle factions to use, which kind of makes sense considering that you could also take this as a big monster single entity on the tabletop if you were playing with the whole Monstrous Arcanum stuff. They were given rules for it. So a Toad Dragon is a giant primordial reptilian horror. They're known for being in the Northern Chaos Wastes, however, some can be found in the known world. They're just extremely rare, there's not that many of them. Toad Dragons have actually been in lore since like 3rd edition, I believe, but they've only been really brought into it since 8th, which was the whole Monstrous Arcanum stuff, and obviously with the Tamokon book too. It's something really interesting, because these creatures are highly destructive, as you can imagine. They're not really too smart, more seen as creatures of destruction more than anything else, and they're supposed to be fairly fast. They've got a lot of abilities that could make them do some damage. For example, a breath weapon on the tabletop, which was actually fairly powerful as it reduced enemy toughness, and it was a toughness save too. So yeah, it was pretty good. The main thing is it was extremely durable. A creature like this is obviously going to be able to do a lot of damage. Think about a Dread Saurian, just put some Nurgle stuff onto it, and there you go. And yeah, I mean, this is freaking cool. It's definitely something that needs to be added in because it's very impressive. Nurgle could do with some bigger monsters. Not only that, Nurgle could do with a big, fast-moving monster, as this on the tabletop could move 8 inches. Not as fast as Cavalry, but still pretty damn fast. I imagine that a big creature like this would be amazing to Doomstack to, would be pretty fun to use. The most important thing is, I mean, cool factor. Just look at the model, it's absolutely insane. I did forget to mention, obviously, there are some Lord and Hero variants missing for the Warriors of Chaos, and obviously the Nurgle Monogod faction too, obviously, you know, the Chaos Lord, and the Hero version too, so this would be the perfect time to get them over and done with, so all variants are there for both the Chaos Warriors and also the Monogod faction, which the main focus will be for that DLC. I know this isn't the most exciting thing, but you have to keep in mind that variety is the spice of life, and while you might not use it, someone else would. Putrid Vikings could be introduced for the Nurgle faction and the Warriors of Chaos too. The great thing about Monogod DLC is that any mortals can go towards the other factions that need to be attached. And the interesting thing about this is Putrid Vikings are essentially the aspiring champions of Nurgle. If you quickly log on to Warhammer 3 and play a Warrior of Chaos faction, you'll notice that there are missing slots up there for aspiring champions of each of the monogod factions. Now, Putrid Vikings would be very tanky, very destructive in melee combat, and I imagine, due to the fact that there are so many different weapon types, either they would be one specialized unit, or they could be 2 or 3 different variants. Which I imagine the latter would probably be done, considering that man-eaters in the Ogre Kingdoms roster are a specialized unit in the tabletop, and then they would just split up. And I wouldn't mind that, because it would give you some variety and it would give you some heavy units. I like the idea of it. I'm a big fan of Putrid Vikings. They don't really fit with Tamokon. They weren't in the Tamokon book. They were an end times unit. But I imagine that it would happen. I imagine it's only a matter of time until we start getting some end times units. Not end times story, but end times units. As if you look at this faction and the Cornate faction, there's a bunch of units that were introduced during the end times that could actually just fill out everything. It could finally flesh out the roster to where it needs to be. The fact that they're missing an aspiring champion unit, rather than make something completely new, I imagine that they'll just do this. This would be the perfect time to bring in the new look for the Pesticores too, giving you a Chaos Spawn type unit which is more focused on skirmishing combat. Original Pesticores were just Bestigores which were fat and had great weapons, that's pretty much it. Whereas we do know that there's a new look for them in Blood Bowl. These look very different to what we've seen, and it would be about time to start seeing the return of the God-touched Gores. Age of Sigmar did it really well with the Slangors and obviously the Zangors, but we're still waiting for the Khorngors and the Pestigores. I feel it could be very useful to have a fast-moving kind of skirmishing type unit for Nurgle. Obviously, yes, you do have the flies and you do have the toads, but this would also benefit a normal Beastmen faction too, because again, Monogod DLC could benefit the Beastmen as it does or would benefit the Warriors of Chaos. And before anyone says that wouldn't be the case, keep in mind that Champions of Chaos benefited the Monogod faction, so it's already there. So we need to talk about the Cavalry units, and there's 2 options here, which both could work, but keep in mind that these DLCs only bring about 5 units each. Well, that would be the old format of Lord Packs. We don't know if this is going to change, considering that now it's focusing on 3 Lords instead of 2. So yeah. There's the Rot Knights, which never had a model, and essentially they were just stronger Chaos Knights of Nurgle. This was something that was introduced during Tamokon. They had their own rules. What you had to do was basically get a normal Chaos Knight box and stick them on a, I think it was a 50mm base, or a 40mm base. But either way, it was much larger, and they had some better stats. Maybe they could take a look at Kha'Zix the Befouled and just design a Knight unit like that, which I think would be very useful. Then, there was another unit which was introduced in Age of Sigmar. However, there were rumors that this was going to be planned for Warhammer Fantasy, which are the Pesticores. Essentially, those are just Blight Kings mounted on Rotflies, and to be honest, this is something that is needed, and I'm also going to state here, because I forgot to mention it on the Lord and the Hero section, that Lord and Heroes should, in theory, have Rotflies as mount options, because yes. So maybe they could decide, rather than doing Rot Knights, they could just bring in a unit of Pesticores, obviously call it something else, but I think that could work out quite well. You'd get a aspiring champion that's mounted on a flying mount. I mean, it would be very, very strong. Both of them work. I'd be happy with one or the other. More so leaning towards Pesticores, because I think that they would add some very interesting heavy flying cav to Nurgle, and obviously the, Warriors of Chaos and stuff like that, so I think this could work out quite well. And then lastly, we're going to talk about 2 units, mostly because they kind of have the same battlefield role, which is a massive shame. I think it's going to be one or the other, though in a perfect world, maybe Creative Assembly want to do like 8 units per faction, which would be pretty fun. But we've got the Plague Ogres and the Bile Trolls of Chaos. Obviously, Plague Ogres are just mutated, chaos-touched ogres, which were really cool in the Tamokon book. Very cool looking models. Kind of fast-moving, hard-hitting, which, you've got the hard-hitting for Nurgle, but you don't have the fast movement. It's essentially just using very durable, very high physical resistance ogres, which would be kind of cool, in all honesty, as it would give you a real big charge unit, and it could stay around with your army taking shots without too much of a worry, which is a main thing. Ogres by themselves, if they charge in, they tend to die off a lot, whereas these ones, due to high physical resistance, would be able to stand a decent amount. And you'd also have the added benefit of that sweet, sweet ogre charge, which, yeah, is pretty cool. Now the second unit is the Bile Troll of Chaos. These are pretty cool because they can spit too, so they'd be like either a half-range unit, so you know, being able to fire as you get close into combat, or having a spit attack. But I imagine that a range unit would be kind of cool, being able to spit as you charge forward, because it gives you a little bit of something there. The only thing with me is I just don't like trolls. For some reason, I don't know why, I've got thousands of hours into this series, but I can't use trolls effectively for some reason. I know they're a flanking unit, they're a shock unit, but yeah, for the life of me, I just can't. Now, I know there's a lot of people that do like troll units, however, and a troll unit would be cool to have a shock unit like that. Then again, the ogre kind of does the same thing and would probably be more durable. This is why I said it's likely going to be one or the other. Creative Assembly do like trolls, and you know, it's because the same rig would be used. We've seen this with pretty much every faction, but the same thing could be said about the ogres. I would prefer the ogres, but hey, in a perfect world we'd get everything. You never know, we could get multiple DLCs for the monogod factions, which would be great. We don't know exactly how long this is going to last though. Now I know a lot of people would be thinking about other characters such as the Glotkin, Guttrop Spume and so on, even the Magath Riders, but I really do think that Tamokhan is going to be next. The thing is, Champions of Chaos, if you haven't played it, spoiler alert, but the story goes to Zanbai Jin and so on. The Zanbai Jin storyline is basically what starts off the Throne of Chaos, the book, the campaign with Tamokhan in it. So I really think that they were kind of hinting at that. Zanbai Jin is featured in the game. Zanbai Jin is an area in the Immortal Empires. There's the plains of Zanbai Jin, which is right close to Archaon, actually right next to where Archaon starts. So this just makes a lot of sense for me because, you know, you'd start off there, you'd push your way down, do a little damage to Cathay, go down the Mountains of Morn, ally up with Drazoa, go into the Border Prince territories, and then go straight for Null, as I do believe that Elsef is going to be the Empire Lord. We'll talk about that a little bit later in another video, of course, but I really think that, yeah, this could be the perfect thing to relive that book. The only thing is, dwarfs don't feature in that book, and we know that dwarfs are in the DLC. So this actually makes me think that we might see different storylines for different factions, which would be absolutely amazing in all honesty. I think something like that would add in a lot of potential for Lord packs, so not everyone's shoehorned, right? Like the thing with Shadow and the Blade. It made no sense to have Deathmaster Snickage versus Malice. So this might be a completely new thing that we'll see for DLCs in the coming future. Now, I could be wrong, but I do feel very strongly about this. I think that this would be the way to go for future content. We're gonna have to wait and see, obviously, but yeah, I don't know. Tamokhan just really speaks out to me, and it would be a big DLC. This would sell. Tamokhan versus Elsef, and then dwarfs likely getting the most attention. Hey, they could completely blindside us and do the Glotkin, but I really do think it's gonna be Tamokhan. The name Thrones of Decay mixed up with the original campaign book, you know, Thrones of Chaos, just kind of fits. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and we'll start a bit of a discussion. Really, you guys could have some better ideas. Honestly, I've seen comments on some of the videos I've been doing lately about like possible DLC, and some of you have had some really cool ideas. Hopefully Creative Assembly are listening and taking some ideas to make DLCs better. But with all that being said, once again, have a great day, guys, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.